everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall too, everywhere. Hi! How are we doing? How are we hanging in there? I hope absolutely wonderfully. So many things are coming in so quickly, gang, and one of the things that I'm being shown as not only a psychic and a medium, yet a practitioner in the healing arts field and in the healing field, is that there are many, many people coming online right now in this time frame of transition, especially, oh my God, especially when we're talking about coming to the end of 2020, which has been the year of evolution. And man, I'm having friends of all left and right. And sometimes that evolution is great. And other times it's really hard. You know, it's been hard. I've had a hard time this year. I'm not going to lie. It's been challenging. And a lot of what's been challenging has been the isolation and not being able to get out and do some of the things I love to do. I mean, I love live music, gang. It's part of my fabric of my being. And there just have been no opportunities for live music, obviously, because in the COVID time frame, that'll spread bugs. And singing, when you project and you put all those particles out there, you're not just breathing 6 to 12 feet away. I mean, you're just blowing it way out there like a fire hose of death and doom if you happen to be infected with the coronavirus. So singing is a bummer. So there's been, no live music this year, which really is the giant butt kicker for me. Also 2020, I had a lot of events that I canceled because it just was not the responsible thing to do, to go into 2020 and have these events. I was graciously extended an opportunity for a very large metaphysical conference in the Northwest, an opportunity to be a keynote speaker. And that was the kindest, most awesome thing ever. Yet I very graciously declined because though I get that there's going to be folks who are ready to rock and roll. And I know that a lot of people make a living doing live events. And so this is putting them in a very tough position to either go bankrupt or to try to social distance the events and mask up and do what you can to try to make a little bit of money for sure. And I just didn't feel like I could do an event well with those parameters. And it's not the person who asked me, it was me. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. So it's been weird, and I did have some events planned that got canceled. I did one event towards the end of this year with my sister-in-law, Melissa Siana, and we did an outdoor, socially distanced hike to go look at pictographs and talk about UFO occupation in the Pryor Mountains in Montana. But it literally was one event, and it was before all the numbers really started spiking again. And again, everybody had masks that they brought, but we were also outside and people were quite far apart. And it doesn't really reflect that way when you look at the pictures of the event. Pictures are so weird. They flatten everything out into a two-dimensional plane, so it looks like everybody is less than 6 feet from one another. But the fact of the matter was we were not sitting right next to each other. So, there's this whole, way of proceeding this year that's been difficult, and it's been isolation oriented, obviously. And what I'm noticing is during our isolation, there's a lot of people who are going through some really tough emotional growth. I'm seeing this all over the place. I'm seeing it in friends and family. I'm seeing it in clients. Big, deep, heavy lifting right now. And I'm kind of hoping that if you're listening to this and you've been avoiding the heavy lifting that's been necessary for you to do, I really hope that you actually engage with it. And none of us want to go through deep emotional pain, except for some very strange people, maybe, who find that fun. I don't know. I'm not that person. So I can tell you that this COVID timeframe has tucked us all away so that we can do some really deep emotional digging and get to the bedrock and the bottom of what we need to get to in order to move forward and do our thing in life. And it's especially important that we get this heavy lifting out of the way, in my opinion, before we hit 2021's year of birth. Because year of birthing new lives, birthing a new world. For some, birthing babies. And what we're looking at here is literally needing to deal with some pretty awful and heavy stuff in our lives before we can move on. And in this vein of heavy lifting, and I talked a lot about it through this COVID timeframe on this podcast and on other formats, blogs and Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, that as we move through in this time frame, a big part of our job is going to be dealing with our own issues and not expecting other people to fix them for us. And this is really causing some tremendous meltdowns in the United States culturally right now. You know, we've got this presidential administration and we're barreling towards what appears to be the end of this energy signature, which is the old world bully pulpit, the sociopathic, consumerist grinder of people. It appears as though this next election is going to phase that energy signature out, at least with the presidency and quite a few senators and representatives that want to hold that ideal dear. And it looks like, and this is just what I'm seeing in the ethers here, it looks like we're bringing in a time frame where whomever is going to occupy the presidency darn better well hold the interest of all people at hand, not just one party over another, but all people. And so this is going to be a little different coming into that. And it's going to really require that all of us transcend a lot of our old patterning in how we navigated the world. So as we look at this COVID timeframe and we look at the new style of, well, I shouldn't say new, it was actually the original style of governance back in the day when the founding people who wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they had this idea in their mind that things could be equal. This coming from people who owned slaves and didn't allow women to vote. Yet for the world they could perceive from their limited lens at the time, they knew that there was something that could be built in this democratic republic, in this experience of anything is possible, that could be even greater than they were able to see for their time frame. So this requires all of us to really clear out the old messaging and old tapes and old DVDs and old, oh God, all this old stuff. We need to get it out of there, because if we don't get it out of there, then what we're going to do is end up with some pretty hardcore old world messages that aren't going to work in the new operating system in the year of birth and beyond. So one of the things that I'm seeing is that people are confronting what they've chosen or not chosen to do with their own inner gifts. And this has been a heavy year. There's no way around it. It's designed as a heavy year. The year of evolution means that we are to close our eyes and go within and get rid of things that no longer serve us emotionally, mentally, psychologically, in our spheres that are physical, in our emotional relationships with human beings, in our relationships with family and our work. This is about looking at who we've chosen to be, not who we were forced to be. Now, this may be slightly button pushy, this podcast, for a few people out there who were raised in very abusive, controlling, or either religious or family cult type of family or social constraints when they were growing up and constructs, because we've been taught a victim mentality in the world. Yet, especially, I'm going to just speak from being in the United States of America, land of the martyrs. In the USA, which of course was founded by religious fanatics being thrown out of England because they were so crazy. Let's not forget that. You know, in the USA, we're dealing with a lot of victim mentality here. And I'm not talking about real people who were actually kidnapped and tied down and victimized and things like that. Victim mentality is different. That's when we decide that my life has not been my own and this is what I've had to do and blah. Well, literally, unless you are drugged and kidnapped and strapped down and have a gun to the back of your head and are being forced to do something or you're dead, we have a lot of choice in the matter. And sometimes we don't realize we have that choice because we've had our choices taken away from us for such a long time as children that we, honest to God, are not empowered enough to believe we have a choice. And that is really important to recognize. You know, there's this gross 1950s old world myth that floated around that everybody in the United States of America has the exact same opportunities. You just got to work real hard, see? And you too will be able to achieve that American dream with a Chevy in the driveway, a house with a white picket fence, and a wife and 2.5 kids with a wonderful career job that you can eventually retire from and get that gold watch right in your pocket. I call some horse pucky on that mythology. Because if you're a person of color in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010s, 2020s, the rules aren't the same for you. If you're a woman, the rules aren't the same for you. And we just hate to talk about that, don't we? Because that means we have to look at the fact that all of us in this nation have, especially those of us who have the privilege of race, even we women who have the privilege of race, even though we're still in the second pole position here. Yet I always say, you know, there's a big difference between being a white woman in this country and a woman of color in this country, okay? Then you add on, how about a woman of color who is gay? How about a woman of color who is trans? I mean, we can keep layering it on because we have these unspoken pecking orders in this nation that require healing. And until we can get into a space of understanding that, then we're going to continue to propagate cycles in the year of birth that just freaking don't work and are going to break down. So when we're dealing with all of this stuff on the inside of ourselves, the heavy lifting year of 2020, race, gender, all of these issues that have come forward that have really shown a giant spotlight on where we have some massive holes in our consciousness here in the United States. We've got to understand that not everybody was given the same messaging as a young child that they can do everything or anything. We've also got a lot of people in this nation, male and female, non-binary people, transgendered people, who have been absolutely disempowered from the time they were a tiny child. So the idea of having a choice in a situation, that's not even there in their mind because they've been controlled and victimized and really subject to some pretty intense cult behavior from the time they were born. So it's important as we go on into this conversation, when I'm talking about the martyr mentality and the victim mentality in the United States, it's important to factor in that we're all coming from a different place here. And there is not one stitch of judgment in this particular message coming through. It's simply observing that we are being asked to grow. And that growth is going to require us to get past a lot of what we thought our identities were, either the superhero or the victim or the oppressed or the oppressor. Now, that doesn't take away from some static facts in the United States that within those facts we do have, without a shadow of a doubt, we do have parameters that cast people in different segments in this country. I get that. Yeah, what I'm talking about today is all of these things are real. All of these things are actual that we've talked about. Yeah, what we're talking about today is the personal choice of how do I deal with where I'm at now? Yes, we have all these outlying factors, but how do I deal with what I've got inside of myself? How do I deal with dreams I've given up on, with accepting that, well, I'm a woman, I'm only going to make this much money, or gosh, whatever it is. How do we deal with our level of acceptance? Now, this gets dicey because it can be button pushy, because you're going to hear a really different America and American experience coming out of the reflection of an African American person's life than you're going to hear from an affluent white male, blonde, blue eyes, who comes out of the Hamptons. You're going to hear a very different world. You're going to hear a very different life from that young man in the Hamptons to that young man who's living on a ranch that's gone bust out in eastern Montana. You're going to hear a very different realm of understanding from a woman who's raised on a reservation and whose cousins are trying to traffic her. So, I mean, we've got so many things going on that, yes, sometimes we're born into a terrible situation. Yet at the end of the day, what do we do with the choices that we have to move forward? And, it frustrates the hell out of me as a person who lives in Montana when I hear people say things like, everybody has an opportunity to excel. We all just need to work hard. Well, that's kind of a line of crap, okay? Because as I've discussed at length up to this point, not everybody is coming from the same starting blocks, and not everybody has the same opportunities to work hard and make your money and blah. That's just not true. That's just not true. However, what is true is that we all have an opportunity to move forward and to grow of the spirit and to be accountable in certain ways to ourselves, to address ways in which we've given up our dreams. We've given up our identity. We've given up our hope. We've given up because, name it. And quite honestly, I know a lot of white men who have given up on who they are too. So this is just not a phenom that's happening to people of color, happening to women, happening to the LGBTQ community. It's happening to all of us because we are all coming out of a world whose absolute identity has been the kingpin at the top, victimizing those at the bottom, trying to get those at the bottom to worship the victimizer at the top. And I have come up with a term for this because apparently we love to name. We love little buzz phrases and names and little terms that we can put in our pocket to identify things and boil them down to a kitschy little bumper sticker concept. We love that in America. So you've heard the term cancel culture, right? And that's, of course, referring to you can't just have a cancel culture. We can't just erase our history and take down these Confederate monuments, and people call it cancel culture. Now they're referring to not patronizing businesses because the businesses' employees or owners won't wear masks. Now people are calling that cancel culture. I'm not sure how that's canceling anything. I mean, what is that canceling? Your business with that person? I don't know. People love to label things. So I was at my esthetician's the other day, and we were chit-chatting, as we often do. And my friend Sonia and I was trying to describe this. I said, what do you call an enabler culture? What do you call I'm in the pocket of the abuser culture? What do you call that? And she's a very sharp-thinking Sagittarius, my friend Sonia. And she says, complicit culture. And I said, oh my God, complicit culture. That's it. Complicit culture. So we're talking about complicit culture and how to not feed into that and how to get to the very bottom of what we need to do in the world to bring through our own gifts and talents. So what is complicit culture? Well, it's when we are complicit with people being awful to other people. It's when we make excuses for the dictatorial, bully, authoritarian, abusive person at the top of the pyramid, whether they're male or female, when we make excuses for their crappy behavior, we are complicit with their abuse, and we support them anyway. And this goes, complicit culture is a form of living through being a victim from an abuser. And this is what I think is really interesting. I was looking at the dynamics of so many amazing human beings that I know firsthand, really beautiful people who help out in their community. They give you the shirt off their back. They will give you anything you need. They will give a person on the street money. They believe that you open your doors to those who are needy. And they will support a president like Donald Trump, who is the antithesis of every single one of those demonstrations of grace, okay? And it's been such a conundrum for me. I'm like, how is that possible? Because these are people who are amazing people. You know, these are people who I've watched go without things in their own life because they've given away what they had to people who are impoverished. And here they're supporting this person who has never, ever done a selfless thing in his whole wide life. He just hasn't. It's not who he is. It's just, I mean, maybe he has, gang, and I, of course, don't know about that. But I'm talking about big, grand gestures, right? That's just not his gig. It's not who he's ever needed to be. So what I think is fascinating here is that in complicit culture, we're saying it's okay for that leader to be verbally abusive or to grab a woman by her hoo-hoo or, well, that's okay because he doesn't really mean it. How many times did you hear that when folks were talking about Trump, right? And look, this is not a political discussion. This is a consciousness discussion. So if you are a Trump supporter, just hang in here through this, okay? Because maybe you'll be finding some stuff in this podcast that you resonate with. Maybe you'll just give me the finger and unsubscribe. Who knows? However, it's an energy that I've noticed that many brilliant, beautiful, kind, loving people make excuses for this particular leader's really awful behavior. And I gotta be honest, it's blowing my mind. I'm like, oh my God, you're this gorgeous, amazing human being who's so giving and so loving. You would never do this to another person. How can you support that? And they always say to me, oh, he doesn't really mean it. He's just joking. And then all of a sudden, I see the level of abuse that individual has endured and normalized in their own life. You know, maybe as a child, they had a raging alcoholic parent that forced them, if they were going to love their parent, really had to force them to see the parent underneath of the abuse and the dysfunction and the addiction in order to love their mom or dad. And children, you know, they have this beautiful way of just finding the beautiful human being under the brokenness. That's part of a child's spirit that is so dear. So, or maybe they had a beautiful family, and maybe nobody in the family was dictatorial. Yet maybe they lived in a culture where the bully alpha was the person that you either respected or you feared. Maybe women had these god-awful husbands that judged the dickens out of them. And in order to find love, they had to say things like, oh, it's okay. I'm just going to make excuses for him because he loves me. I mean, and this can happen on hugely subtle levels. A lot of really super amazing, empathic, psychically gifted men that I know support Donald Trump. And a lot of them are white. And I look at the lives that these men have led, and they've had to try to be that alpha. A lot of them of a certain generation, especially baby boomer and up, they've had to try to be that alpha. And they were raised by men who had to be the alpha because that was how we socialized our males. And I see a lot of men that were just destroyed by this false patriarchal Superman archetype. It's crap. I mean, after we are done dealing with women's issues, after we are done dealing with our people of color issues, after we are done dealing with our trans issues, after we are done dealing with all of these grand and our Native American issues, oh my God. And yes, that falls under people of color, yet the Native issues, the poor Native American folk in this country, they're beyond down the food chain. They're just invisible. It's like, yeah, whatever, Indian. I mean, it's awful. I live in what they call Indian country here in Montana. I live in a culture where people will not, oftentimes, some people, extend the same opportunities to a person of color. Oftentimes in Montana, you find a ton of people that don't care what color you are because it's the big great West, and come out and we still have that old West acumen out here. Come out and cut your teeth on the earth and show the world who you are. We still have a lot of that. But we also have a lot of whitey insular people who may look sideways at an African-American person in Montana because there aren't many. Yet it's a different way that they will look. That same population I'm referring to will look at a Native American. Those folks just don't even exist. They're trash under their feet. They're like, another drunk Indian. I mean, it's not even, there's a black person. It's, kind of in the same way that I've had friends of mine who are from the American South. They will tell me that the black community is treated that way in that area of the country. So I've had a lot of knockdown, drag out arguments in bars when I was a younger person with white people, white men, who were trying on the alpha modality because that's who they thought they had to be to defend their sensitive hearts, to defend their sensitive people. And so they jump on the victimizing bandwagon because if, that old alpha male, weird old world, whoever's the toughest oppresses everybody else. It's actually very ape-like. We are primates, and the toughest old male ape runs the whole group of apes, right? And smashes in the head of the challengers and blah. I would like to think as human beings that we are transcending the need to smash someone's head in with a rock so we can be in charge. That would be nice to believe that. Maybe I'm deluding myself at this day and age. However, I've had a lot of arguments at bars back in my youth, with white guys who were forged under this broken alpha system. That's what I call it. And they would get in to talk. There'd be some Native American guy who would come in with his friends, just partying like we all were, having a beer like we all were. And the first comment out of that guy's mouth would be, look at the prairie N-word. I can't even say it. I can't say it. Look at that prairie N-word. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? And that's what they would call Native folks, is a prairie N-word. And then we get into a big fight about that. And then I'd end up calling them white trash and blah, blah. And that two wrongs don't make a right, and that's never good. So bottom line here is after we get through showing a light on the injustice that we've allowed, all of us in some way have played into this system, whether we want to or not. That's why it's called systematic racism. The system is stacked against you. And it's so funny. You know who says there's no such thing as systematic racism? White people. That's not true. Well, of course it's not true to you, especially white men. God, they get all mad. Some white men. I know there's a lot of white men that listen to this podcast. You guys rock. Obviously, we're not talking about you. However, a lot of white men get their, I can't say their tits in a twist. They get their balls in a twist over the fact that a system is stilted in their favor. And that takes away from that alpha, strong, beat your chest like an ape mentality, because that means you kind of have a bunch of cheats that other people don't have. And that doesn't make you quite as tough and successful as you probably thought you were when you're really not competing with nearly the people you thought you were to be the guy at the top of the hill. All of a sudden, your hill, which you think in your mind is as tall as a Rocky Mountain peak, is pretty much a pitcher's mound when you take all the competition away, right? And that's why I've noticed a lot of Caucasian men have a hard time with understanding that the systematic racism and sexism, gang, has been part of our country since the get-go. Yet, what do we have this opportunity to do? After we shine a light on healing all of these injustices, gang, we've got to turn a compassionate eye to our males. Because these guys have been getting literally stripped of every single thing that they are from the get-go to have to be this fake, unfeeling robot that bashes someone else's head in with a rock if they're challenged, and they've got to have pieces and parts that work like a rocket going through space their whole entire life, otherwise they aren't a man. And I mean, just these are insane bars to try to live up to. And I know that if you're a person who's not a white male, you're hearing this and saying, well, tough crap, you've had it at the top for a long time. Even then, the system that put the white men on top was destroying the white men. So, I mean, the whole thing is broken. The whole thing is broken. And that's one of the reasons that in 2020, we've had to sit and look at the deepest, darkest, ugliest parts of our heavy lifting and what we've had to do in ourselves. Because this heavy lifting has been rough. It's been rough to address our own belief systems. And so going back to the example of complicit culture, okay? And again, I don't mean to offend anybody with this. It's just that these are hard truths right now. If I were a supporter of a president, if I ever found out, I voted for Barack Obama, okay? And if I ever found out that Barack Obama was doing the things Trump was doing and saying the things he did, I would be so embarrassed that I'd want to take my vote back. And I know a lot of people who voted for Mr. Trump who feel that way. I know a lot of them, though, in this complicit culture, they're like, how can you get that mad at this guy? He's just kidding. Can't you see? Why are you so sensitive? God, and that's why they call liberal folks snowflakes. I didn't even get it, you guys. I'm just so lagging in the area of insulting another human being that I didn't even understand what a snowflake was. I had to have some other friends describe it to me. And the reason they called liberal folks snowflakes, the right-wing name-calling type of people, was because apparently in the mind of these folks who think that there's nothing wrong with Trump's behavior and he's just joking around and what the hell's wrong with all you sensitive patsy asses, it was like we were so fragile we just melt like a little snowflake. And so what I look at in complicit culture is that we have hundreds of years of making excuses for complete and total asshats. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years. Women making excuses for abusive husbands. Husbands making excuses for their abusive fathers. Daughters making excuses for their abusive mothers. Sons making excuses for their abusive parents. We have had generations of people in this world saying, oh, Dad was just kidding when he got really drunk and said I was a fat, ugly whore. He was just kidding. That's just Dad. Or, a guy saying, oh, Mom was just kidding when she, told me I was a useless piece of crap because I wouldn't pay her bills. That's just Mom. You can't take her seriously. We make excuses for people who are abusive in our lives because we love them and we want to believe they love us. So we we basically enable them. We become their enablers. And in complicit culture, we enable the abusers. Instead of walking away from that situation, instead of calling out the behavior in that situation and saying, wow, this is really unhealthy, instead of any of that, we see that we create excuses. And generally we create excuses because we just don't want to believe. Maybe in the case of people who have had abusive parents, just as example. Maybe we don't want to believe that our parents really are that ugly on the inside. Maybe we want to believe that somewhere they love us, even though they're calling us a piece of crap and locking us in our bedroom. We make excuses for the abusers so that we can find value in ourselves in the middle of the abusive moment. That's why many people who have endured abuse will continue on being complicit and making excuses for the behavior. So when you look at all these folks in the United States, and I'm not one of those people who believes that just because you support Trump, you're a racist. I believe that there are people out there who have been so damaged by culture, by the American shame culture, by the American patriarchal bully culture, especially men who have been so stripped of their emotionality. They're so busy chasing the alpha position. They're not seeing the forest through the trees because their sights are so narrow because that's what they've had to do to survive. Okay? I believe that there are very non-racist people who are literally trained into be complicit and enabling abusive behavior because of their life. And, it's interesting. I've sat down with some wonderful folks, and some of them still talk to me and some of them don't. And that's just the way it goes in the way that 2020 rolled out. And I have asked folks who I know through and through are not racist people. Some of them are of color. Some of them are Native American. Some of them are Black. Some of them are in interracial marriages. And I will ask them and I will say, can I ask you a question just straight out without you throwing your Starbucks on me here? How is it that you can be a Black person or a person married to a person of color or a minority or a gay person and support a president who is just so non-committal in denouncing racism? How can and kind of gives nods to those folks out there? I mean, how does that work? And overwhelmingly, they all say the same thing. Oh, he doesn't really mean that. He's just trying to get a rise out of everybody. And so then I've gotten in and asked these folks about their parents, their lives. A lot of them had really great parents. Maybe one or two of them had a best friend or a brother who was or a sister who was somebody they admired greatly, but abused the hell out of them emotionally and were incredibly conditional with their feelings towards that person. So that person began to make excuses for why that person treated them badly. Some of these folks have had bosses whose butts they've kissed for 20 years, trying to climb the ladder, whether it's a male or a female, trying to kiss that butt. And so they've normalized emotionally abusive behavior. Complicit culture. And we can all be complicit sometimes because we want to believe the best in people. Yet if somebody's showing you that they are really a horrible person who needs some help, and I say horrible person, meaning somebody who's enacting behaviors who harm others and victimize others and deplete others, if we're seeing somebody acting like this and we are making excuses for that person and enabling them and saying, oh, they're just kidding. It's no big deal. They don't mean it. What if they do mean it? Then we are complicit in their wounding. So we really have to go back to the bottom line of how we're all complicit sometimes, And I am trying to do my best, and I still find little hinks that are in my DNA, they're in my choice making, they're in my socialization that come up, and I'm like, ooh, there's a natural bias there. Wow, you better probably watch that, sister. And it's not because I'm trying to be some god-awful, fakey-bakey, metaphysically namaste person, or I'm not trying to be some politically correct nightmare that's going to wag the judging finger of proselytization in the face of all my friends who don't believe the same way that I do. Man, it's because I want to evolve, okay? I don't want to be held back by preconceived notions that elevate me by cutting down another person. And that is the alpha world, the old world, the 20th century world that those of us of a certain age were all born into. And this threatens people so much to talk about this. God, especially I find that males get really in my grill about this in a different way that women get really in my grill. And it's interesting because women will get in your grill in an entirely different way than men will. Men will just get nasty and they'll take out that rock and just try to, so to speak, not a real rock, but a pretend rock, okay? An emotional rock, a verbal rock. And they will try to beat you in the head with it to shut you up. Just shut up, shut up, shut up with insults and shut up. That energy, right? Because that's what they were taught. That the alpha wins. The alpha is the one who is in power. Women are different. Women come in and just make a tiny little incision on the inside of your leg that you can barely see and take a sewing hook and just stick it in there and wrap it around that artery that runs all the way up inside your leg that's huge that they actually go and, take out if they're trying to do a heart surgery. And they begin to twist that little knitting hook until that artery is squarely around there. And then they just start to yank it out of your leg and rip apart your internal artery systems with guilt, and, well, I can't believe you're unpatriotic, and I can't believe you would say this about my husband and my family. How dare you? I know a wounded, victim, anger, blah, but it's all wrapped up in what a terrible human being you are and the guilt, and you should know better than to actually, women love to silence each other, don't we? We have learned to shame each other as women because we've been shamed for thousands of years. Shame us into shutting up. So women will turn on each other with that 1950s, well, I can't believe that she said that. Well, I can't believe she's that person, but well, God bless her. Whereas men will just, try to steamroll you. So as we talk about this, and I've asked my friends, do you feel complicit in supporting somebody who's just unapologetically, as the President of the United States, saying, no, I really mean these things. Actually, I mean it. Until he really gets called out, and then he's like, I was kidding. But go back. Donald Trump is famous for saying what he means and meaning what he says. And quite frankly, I can, from the perspective of an American who has been lied to by their government, I don't know how many times since I was a kid, I'm not attracted to Donald Trump's modalities at all, yet I can at least objectively see how many people out in the United States would at least be attracted to somebody who just, quote, spoke their mind. The problem is that the mind is not willing to evolve, and so you've got this one-trick pony saying one thing and unapologetically saying these things. So there were a couple of, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there were a couple of instances where the President of the United States said some pretty terrible things. And when they asked him, do you mean that? He said, well, of course I mean it. And he didn't follow it up with, I'm kidding, later on. And this was more early on in his presidency. And so I've brought these examples to my friends, and I said, well, what about this? And they're like, oh, he doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean it. And I would say, well, now okay, let's just say he doesn't mean it. But I'm noticing here, he actually said, I mean this, and they're asking him, do you mean that? And he's saying, yes, I mean that. So does he mean it? And they will say, again, going into that enabling the abuser mode, they'll say, oh, he's just saying that because he knows that people don't really get it, but we support him. We know he doesn't really mean it. So complicit culture. The complicit culture is what created this cesspool in Hollywood where women were expected to do whatever for a male that wanted them to do it. And women would do it. They would do it, ladies. So let's not just say, oh, poor me, look at me. Women would do it. Sometimes they wouldn't do it. Sometimes they were raped. Sometimes it was against their will. Yet they would, rather than bringing up charges against that person, they would shut up and take the role. And that's where the hashtag #MeToo movement came out of. Harvey Weinstein, who, isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? Once Harvey Weinstein's power was stripped away from him, the guy just deteriorated. And what I think is very interesting is if we look at what we use as fuel as human beings. Harvey Weinstein was and is a pretty terrible guy. In terms, I'm sure his immediate family wouldn't agree with that, but professionally, he was a pretty terrible guy. And I knew people in the entertainment industry, I know them to this day, that dealt with him firsthand and escaped being raped or got away from a bad situation, but they were never cast. They got blacklisted. They had to work 5 times as hard for work, these women, and always did sort of stay on the outside fringy circle of things because they didn't give him what he wanted. So, it's interesting because that person, basically, I believe that Harvey Weinstein is a huge empath who is broken and who somewhere along the line, he himself was part of complicit culture and made excuses for horrible things in order to maybe justify what he wanted. Yet what I think is so fascinating here is that when I look at that, he literally ate the energies of women by dominating them. And when he could no longer do that, when he was caught, when people stood up to him, when he went to prison, he shriveled up like an Applehead doll person. Remember those from the 70s? Okay. he shriveled right up because he was not able to eat the energy out of the people that he once could eat. And so I remember him, and of course I'm sure part of this was theater for the court, but when they were trying Harvey Weinstein and he comes out on his walker, but honest to God, the guy looked like hell. He looked like somebody had dehydrated him. He was a husk of who he once was because his gig was up. He was a starving empath whose availability to suck energy out of women through victimization was over. So let's look at these abusers. The abusers have to make you feel like crap, and hopefully they want you to come begging them back. And when you tell the abuser to go fly, usually they either leave you alone or pretty soon they're kissing your butt because it's a bully gone bad. Or they just go find somebody else they can abuse. So when we're looking at complicit culture, let's talk about all that. Let's talk about all the people in Hollywood, all the liberals in Hollywood who were complicit, knowing that Harvey Weinstein was a complete piece of poo professionally, who was a victimizing, rapey jerk. And all the liberals who said nothing because they didn't want to lose his business. They didn't want to lose his money. They wanted to get cast in something. So I'm telling you, gang, complicit culture is not just all about people who support Trump. I'm using that as an example because that's kind of low-hanging fruit. Or how about when Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky thing first happened? And there were all these women that came forward on the liberal side of things and said, oh, men just do that. Oh, that's expected of a president. Who cares? He's a good president. Instead of, God, what a crappy thing to do to your family, man. Get it together. Bill, stop lying. Come on, man. Just admit you did it and move on, okay? Try to be a better person, and we'll try to support you. But that complicit culture of women making excuses for their men who can't double dick. Oops, I meant to say double dip. Well, that was a little Freudian. Who can't help but double dipping. Dip-ing. That was funny. Oh, my God. Anyway, you've got this complicit nature in women who are making excuses for poor behavior. And so it doesn't matter if a person is of a Republican or a Democratic bent. It is innate in our culture, in America, to make excuses for the abuser. Sometimes the abuser is a woman. I mean, look at Meryl Streep's character in The Devil Wears Prada. There are a lot of maniacal, crazy women out there who are doing terrible things also. Look at that creepy, deaky lady who was helping out Jeffrey Epstein. That weirdo. What was her name? Ghislaine Maxwell, I think. I hope I'm saying that right. And she was the madam. She was pimping all these young girls out and sucking them in. I mean, listen, I'm not saying men are the only ones who victimize people here, okay? Yet what I'm talking about, gang, complicit culture, it touches all of us. It touches all of us in some way because we have been trying to transcend the old world that was run on the abuser and the victim. Okay? Even old world churches painted God as this unforgiving mechanism. If you varied out of the line, you were just sent straight to hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You must fear this God that will come down on you like a ton of angry bricks because you effed up. I mean, really? So I'm the creator of the universe, and I am that petty? I don't think so, all right? So what we've got here is a long-standing tradition in humanity that goes back to our genome, male or female, mixed in with the mammalian DNA that we have, that strength, power, and oppression is the leader. And the way that you watch an ape, keep his ape troop in line. He will beat other apes. He will frighten other apes. He will sexually abuse some of the female apes. He will do whatever it takes to keep them in line. He's an animal. So I understand we're mammals, and I understand we're animals, and I understand that the template for shaming and killing in order to keep people in line is deep, deep, deep in our genes. Yet what if right now we are being beckoned by the universe to not transcend what we are, because we need to learn from what we are. We are required to grow, not to just recreate ourselves and, like with the Samantha Stevens twinkle of the nose and the snap of a finger, become something different. We are literally being asked to see inside of ourselves and understand that we have these, I guess, defaults in us, yet right now, we are being asked to come forward and evaluate differently. And that doesn't mean there's not a time for anger, and that doesn't mean there's not a time for defending yourself from poking somebody in the nose or whatever. It's simply to say that if we continue to choose, when I say leaders, I don't even mean the president. I mean leaders in our companies. I mean leaders in our families. I mean, if we continue to model for our children that the most effective form of leadership is emotional, physical, psychological abuse, then we are part of the complicit culture. We're part of it. We need to teach our children how to recover their self-esteem, how to have a thick skin with people who are never, ever going to get this concept that I'm bringing through today. We do need to teach kids that they're not going to fall into a pillar of salt and have to sit downstairs and be on 7,000 tranquilizers and smoke a bowl of weed and play Xbox for the rest of their life because somebody was mean to them. We do need to instill in our children what it means to find their sense of self in the face of horrible bullies. And where does that center how do we get that center back when someone is so damaged that they're trying to damage them? These are important, important lessons to teach our children, because not everybody's going to get the memo that it needs to be a kinder, gentler world. And there will be people writing the abusive, nasty, authoritarian, angry, raging, you call it whatever, bully alpha format right off the cliff as we go into this new earth. And there's not a thing we can do about it except try to get out of the way from the damn horse and don't get trampled to death. Yet can we at least all agree that all of us on some level have been part of complicit culture? I know, I will own mine from the entertainment industry perspective alone. I knew people in the music industry who were doing horrible things to young women in order to get them just even a developmental deal or to even pass them on to the next level of somebody who could pay attention to them. And I too was a young lady, and I didn't do a lot of the things that they wanted me to do, which is why Pope Jane only got to a particular level back in the day. We didn't go in the direction that not all, but many young women went back then. And so it was a weird situation to know, okay, that guy is going to try to get you in the back of that car and he's going to try to do this and tell you that's and that and that. But there was just this unspoken thing like, okay, you passed on me, but you don't say anything, because if I found out you said something, then I'm going to take out all of your opportunities. So it wasn't that I said nothing, but I said just enough, but very little. And usually only said it to the young ladies who I really thought, the corn-feds from Indiana, who I really thought were going to get overrun. And I would just say something like, when you go to your meeting with him, make sure you stay in the restaurant, is what I would say. And that's about it. I would not call his boss. I wouldn't say, go onto a message board and hashtag me too and say, boy, this is this person's name and he tried to do this to me, because there was an unspoken rule. So I was part of complicit culture when I was a kid in my 20s. Absolutely. We all have been part of it in some way. And this isn't meant to shame anybody. It's meant to say that, my God, look at this crappy, twisted, sideways, broken old world that we're coming out of. And, look how we are struggling to be something better. And it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. Yet, let me ask you this. It doesn't mean, let me ask you, what's it going to take for us to come out of being complicit with the abusers? I'm not saying don't cut your friends some slack. I'm not saying don't let somebody have a little bit of slack if they're having a bad day, a bad week, they're grumpy. I mean, we don't need to become these pious puke in your mouth people who the minute somebody says something off color because they're having a bad day, we don't need to get into this weird, I am not going to be complicit with your verbal abuse today. We don't need to be that asshole, all right? However, I think you understand what I'm talking about on the larger scale. If we hold our leaders not to the razor's edge of, if they make a mistake, we nail them to a tree and burn them alive because they're human and they're going to make mistakes. How about if we just hold them to a desire for accountability? If you F up, tell the American people you effed up. If you are a boss, tell your team you effed up. Say, gang, or if you really went into something truly believing in it, and then you get down the ways of the situation and you recognize that what you really initially believed in isn't working out and is harming people. Own it. And come forward and say, gang, come forward with some humility. Show your growth. It takes strength to demonstrate growth. Show your growth. And come out and say, hey, this is a mistake I made. I grew. If we hold our leaders to this razor's edge, to never allow them to grow, to never allow them to come forward and say, wow, I really made a mistake here. And the information I had, I wanted to believe in it. Maybe I wanted to believe in it because it was my own bias. Maybe I just believed it because people thought it was true. Now I found it's not true, and I sent us down a rabbit hole, and I am sorry. And we're going to make every reparative action from this point forward. We're going to fix it. We're going to get back on track. That's called accountability. It's sexy. It's strong. It's what real leaders do. And if we can all be the leader in our own lives and do that, be the leader, be the first person to apologize if you know that you overstepped. And don't run people through these weird tests to see how much they love you. How much do you love me? I'm just going to be a martyr and secretly ask for help and attention seek over here. And if you don't come back and tell me you love me at a certain time, then you failed my test and you really don't love me and I can continue to be the victim. Oh my God, let me tell you something. 2020 is going to have no salty tears for you in its bucket. So pull it together, okay? If you happen to know someone who uses victimization for attention, oh, Nelly, that's going to be rough. 2021 is going to suck. So I know sometimes these angelic messages are a bit heavy. Angels are heavy. They are not little fluffy, puffy little things that float around. God loves you. God wants you to know that you're going to have a very Merry Christmas this year. That's not how they operate. They come in and they're like, look, crap's out of line. Fix it or your species will die. Peace out. I got a nebula to clean up. Gah. That's angels. Okay? So I try to puff up the message as much as possible, but sometimes it's just the hammer of truth. And it's important for us all to recognize on some level we've been, all of us, part of the complicit culture. So how about recognizing that and saying, oh, God, yeah, probably this or that at some point, or look the other way at some point, or it's not my fight, all these things. And how about if we go forward with some discernment? Because there is going to be serious need for people to stand in the gap for those who do not have the same opportunities as others coming up in 2021 and onward. That is different than making everything your fight. Choose your battles, man. Yet, not everything is going to be your battle. Yet, the battle for all of us is to give away some old world lenses. I think about going to the eye doctor all the time. It's fascinating. And I think about emotional growth, and they're really kind of the same thing. If I go into, I love my eye doctor here in Billings, Montana. Gosh, she's just so awesome. And I love the glasses place that makes my glasses, Vision Optical down here in Billings. And they have these really cool, amazing frames. And I mean, it's just a cool place, right? And I don't walk in there and sit down to my eye exam, especially at 51 years old, and say, okay, I'm expecting my exact same prescription. Now, if I get my same prescription, that's interesting. But it seems like every year my eyes are getting just a hinty more in need of reader portions in my progressive lenses, right? However, for some reason, we seem to think that we're going to go through life with the same prescription that worked when we were in our 20s. And we're still going to be able to see clearly through lenses whose prescription reflects back on when we were 20. For some reason, this seems to be a belief system that we as human beings are held to. And I think we probably believe that, at least according to these angels. I think we probably believe that because, the devil we know is a lot more convenient than the devil we don't. And we do so many things in our lifetime, day to day. Think about it. Think about how many choices you've made. Because doing that choice would hurt less. It doesn't mean it's the right choice. Maybe choice A was the right choice for you in your long-term timeline, for your healing, for your growth, but you defaulted to B because it was more convenient. I mean, I know people who stay in marriages for years and years and years. Both parties are just grossed out by the other person. They don't have sex anymore. They don't talk anymore. They're both having affairs. They both resent each other. They both hate each other's guts because the other one won't leave the other one. And they're just in this crazy situation of seething hatred. Mostly they're mad at themselves because they won't free themselves for their future. And this is all going on. And they stay in that relationship because they'd rather not deal with option A, which is hassle around finances. So they stay in option B because it's, quote, easier. That's easier, man, to live with somebody who hates your guts and is sleeping with 6 other people on the side. That's easier. Do you see where our human heart, our little baby hearts get broken so hard, gang? They get broken so deeply that we convince ourselves that the crappiest situation on this planet is better than enduring heartbreak. I mean, literally, think about that a minute. That's intense, right? The fear that comes out of addressing our own heartbreak is so wicked. We make so many decisions out of fear instead of hope. So what this message is all about is as we go forward into 2021, the year of birth, we are still in 2020 doing the last minute cleanup. Where do we victimize ourselves? Where do we say, nobody loves me because I'm not getting blah, blah? Where do we do that? And how can we stop that? Because we are being complicit with ourselves, buying into our own crap of not just getting to the bottom of strengthening ourselves. And obviously, there are people who truly are victimized. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when all of us are needy and attention-seeky. Men will tend to pout and slam things around and tell their partners, like, what's the matter, honey? Our little inner 4-year-old freaks out. Women go the opposite direction. We go the fainting martyr, the bawling, oh my God, nobody cares. I'm abandoned. Nobody loves me. We go so gross, ladies. We go so gross into right? Come on, we've all done it, girls. So, if we stop being complicit with our own enablement, if we stop enabling ourselves, imagine the leaders we will become for ourselves. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's lonely work. I know a lot of people in 2020 who have been doing this hard work. I've been one of them. I've been doing my best with it. I'm not saying I'm the champion. I'm saying I've done my best with it. And with this best that I've done, I have seen massive growth in myself and massive amounts of forgiveness coming out of myself toward people who I have considered harmful or hurtful in the past. As I have dealt with my own crap, gang, I have found this well of forgiveness for the crap other people are going through. And it is phenomenal. And it just chokes me up with tears how releasing it is to not hold myself to this victim mentality. Oh, poor me. I never got far enough in entertainment because I didn't do such and such with so-and-so in the back of a limousine. That's victim mentality. I made choices not to, so I could look myself in the mirror. And I am proud of those choices. So why rude? Oh, poor me, poor me. And I'm just using that as one example. It's such low-hanging fruit in my life. However, what about all of us that gets in there and takes complete and total stock of who we are and dealing with our pain? And I'm going to kind of wrap this concept up. This angel is bringing it around for me. When we are dealing with our own stuff, when we're dealing with the depth of our own poor me, nobody cares about me, nobody loves me, do you know what you're saying? If you're somebody who gets into these testing the people in your life, men and women both do this. This is what we were taught to do by the old world. We test those who love us to see how much they love us. It's so gross. But we do because we've been taught to do that for thousands of years. It's in our DNA. So we go through this testing people. And then when people are like, F you, I'm not going to be manipulated, see ya, then we can create the inner narrative of restricting ourselves, the self-fulfilling prophecy of the person who is always abandoned. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there who truly have been abandoned, which is why I get real pissy when I see so many people going into these games of playing, do I really matter to you? Because I'll tell you, there's folks out there who really have been abandoned, and I'd like the people playing the martyr game to switch roles with that person who really has been abandoned and see how that feels and see if that's an appropriate extortion mechanism when someone else has actually truly suffered that. It's kind of like somebody crying rape who hasn't actually been raped. It's just not okay. So if we think about getting into what causes us to do these things, and telling ourselves, for instance, that it's okay to do that, that's being complicit. So have some compassion if you have some friends coming up in this time frame that you notice are escaping. They're running. We're going to have a lot of runners. We got a runner! We're going to have a lot of runners in 2021 and the end of 2020. People who are running away from doing their hard, heavy lifting. They are looking for other people to make them feel better. They are furious that one person isn't giving them the prescription or the savior isn't handling it for them. They are furious about all of it because they are seeking something outside of themselves. They will resent family and friends because that person isn't there enough, isn't picking up the phone enough, isn't making room for there enough, all while they're testing them to see do you care enough about me? Gang, I'm seeing this behavior rampantly all over the place. And again, and men and women both have masculine and feminine energy. That is the feminine response in either a male or female to that testing. A heavily masculine response is I'm going to go inside of myself. I'm going to pout. I'm never going to talk to you. I'm going to stomp off. I'm going to slam the door. I'm going to ignore, and you need to chase me down and ask me what's happening. That's the more masculine response. So what if we stop being complicit with ourselves and going through these games of trying to get other people to show us that they care? Because what is that really about? It's because we have not cared for ourselves. We are the one that has abandoned us at every turn. We are the one that has given up our dreams and our drive and our goals for the sake of another, for the love of this person, because we thought we needed to, because this, because that. Oh, look at us giving up everything up. We gave up on us, gang. We did. We can't trust us not to give up on ourselves. So we test other people. Because if you can't trust you sure as hell can't trust the person to your right. So how about if we stop being complicit in not trusting ourselves? And how about we just start doing things that we consider have integrity? And how about if we just start trusting that we're there for us? And yes, there are people in the United States who don't have the same opportunities. Yet when it comes to dealing with who we are and being accountable inside of ourselves, everyone is dealing from the same level playing field. In personal accountability, everybody is in a personal playing field that is the same. So think about a society if we could take it all down to that level. And I could handle my crap and you can handle your crap. And God bless little Donald Trump. He can handle his crap. And old Joe, God bless Joe Biden, man. He's hanging in there. He's held together with a piece of chewing gum and some hope blown into a thimble. God, Joe, just stay upright, dude. None of these people are perfect. None of them. And it's not about being perfect, gang. It's about being as blissfully accountable to yourself as you would be to others. And then it's about being able to forgive other people when they mess up. Because you know they're trying their hardest to be as accountable as they can. And this message really goes out to the older generations. I'd say really Gen X and above. I don't see this knee-jerk reaction in the millennials and Gen Z as much. Or the lockdown generation, I'm not seeing it as much. But especially we oldies. We oldies, we got to be careful, you see. We got to be careful to not get to the defensive, you see. It's an ugly way to be. Don't get all defensive, don't you know, when you're called out on your poo-poo. Don't be the defensive. Because that's what we were taught to do. We were taught to be horribly defensive. And that's, again, that alpha bully culture that we are complicit with. Are you following me? Complicit culture. Stockholm syndrome. Worshipping the abuser. And sometimes the worst abuser of ourselves is us. So extend yourself some grace. Extend others grace. No matter what happens in this presidential election, we do not need to pull people through a knothole in a fence to hurt them as badly as they hurt us in commentary. Two wrongs never ever make a right. Thumper's mom was right. Okay? Trust yourself. Own your stuff. Don't be a runner. You will live through encountering some of your darkest, hardest stuff. And if you are somebody that really needs somebody to witness that with you, call a friend. If it's too scary to submerge into the black pit that you've never been in before, called your worst fears about yourself, have someone there to witness that experience with you. Call a counselor. My God, there's professionals that put on their splunking gear with you, and they just attach right to you, and they go down into that deep well of regret and self-hatred and that inner child who's broken because maybe the family or parent structure abused them in some way, even though they didn't intend to. Have help. It's time we light our caverns. And there's always going to be little parts of us that need to stay just a little dark so we can grow our mushrooms and the little bats can go nanai and we have ecosystems of darkness that aren't evil. I'm talking about the big caverns that really we've worked hard to keep the light out of that are supposed to be brilliantly echoing the light inside of us. You know, if we can handle this, then we will do away with complicit culture. Because we will no longer be complicit in the self-abuse that allows the rise of authoritarianism, dictatorships, and really the model that the whole world was built upon up until this point. So, do what you can. Forgive yourself, love your neighbor, and I will see you next podcast.